Oh, we're live. Hey, everyone. Jessica has just joined us, and Trevor, welcome. Rory just joined. Everybody, happy Friday. Happy 420. I am here with James Wormser. Honored to have him as my guest today. And we are, I'm talking from Seattle. James is there in Boston. And we're going to have a conversation about organic gardening, organic cannabis production, that is, and living soil. And I have some other questions for you too, James. But first, how are you?
Excellent, excellent. Long week of cannabis cultivation, so I got no complaints.
You said that you just got done flipping a room, so it was basically 3 days from taking them down to replanting. Is that right?
Yeah,
Tuesday to Friday?
we would generally we harvest on Mondays, but given the holiday, most of my team was off, so we harvested starting on Tuesday. We took down 2 rooms and cleaned them, turned them over, replanted. Now they're in veg still, but they're filled and operational again as
Hmm.
of today.
So the new rooms are in veg, but not you didn't flip them to flower yet.
Yeah, the one of the things that really holds back the cycle in living soil is you need to root in your media. And for us, we
Hmm.
have giant beds in the room, so you have to give some time. I think it's best to give some time for veg. We
Hmm.
have a very abridged veg time of 5 days.
Wow. So,
So it's a 3 week veg in the container in half gal
okay.
container in veg, and
Yeah.
then it's transplanted from that half gal into the bed and 5 days and then flip. My initial history and understanding would have wanted to veg for considerably longer in the bed, maybe less
Yeah.
time in the container and longer in the bed, but that's sort of one of the compromises that I've learned to make commercial cultivation possible, and I think for certain strains, maybe it can be done with no veg, but I think that there's definitely an advantage to to rooting for some amount of time. I think I like to call day one of flower the day you change the lights, but I
Mm.
think a lot of people would say that the first day of flower is from when you see bud set, or there's at least some discussion as to when that is. And
Mm.
so even if you were to put a plant in there with no veg, maybe technically there are a few days of veg, depending on how you look at what veg means.
Yeah. Yeah. I always figured it was when you flip the lights, when you flip the cycle,
I agree, but I
right?
think if you start to compare indoor to outdoor, when do
Mm.
you? I guess you can just
Yeah.
base the light cycle, but it's a slower, like it just yeah, the way that it happens so much slower. I don't know if it's a direct correlation in that regard. So
Mm.
I don't know. I've seen people argue about it recently, and I think it's sort of interesting. But the plant is still doing vegetative in a vegetative mode at least for the
Mm.
first number of days of flower. So
Mm.
5 days in the beds, I would imagine it's still mostly building roots and so on.
Mm. For about a week or so, at least.
That's
Yeah.
a some amount of time.
Yeah.
But I mean, they take off pretty fast. But yeah, I think there's 3 owners at Tower 3, the place that I work at, and one
Yeah.
of them is like a real 20-year veteran grower, and he really pushed me to do less veg in the beds. I felt comfortable with that. That was less
Mm.
comfortable for me, but
Yeah.
um,
Well,
it's
because we think bigger, if we grow bigger plants, we're going to have a bigger harvest and, increase yield, bigger plants. That's generally been the thinking, right?
yeah, I think we have really explosive growth in the beds,
Mm.
and honestly, if we veg much longer, I would have to have a different pruning strategy.
Mm.
We're growing some pretty massive plants, strain dependent. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, it's interesting.
Do you do anything to push? So that 5 day stretch that you're giving them for veg is short. So you're doing anything to really push the nutrients or push the root production during that
Um,
phase?
so the nutrients are all pretty much just in the soil. I don't really. Uh,
Oh, gotcha.
I add like maybe a tiny bit of silica and a tiny bit of digested sugar. Not
Mm.
really so much because they need it, but more as to outcompete any potential metal uptake.
Mm.
We're tested very strictly for metals, and I didn't have the luxury of buying new soil to fill these
Mm.
beds. I used spent soil that we had at the facility, and not
Mm.
that it's bad soil, but when I started doing the testing and building a program based on it, on paper it was bad.
Hmm.
Like it was
The
not
metals accumulating from the nutrients.
um what was accumulating?
The metals accumulating from the nutrients.
In organics,
Or
the minerals just naturally have a metals content,
yeah,
and I think there are some ways to vet inputs carefully to avoid metals, but also if you have real inputs, there's naturally going to be some metals, and from
yeah,
certain aquatic inputs as well. It's just again, like there's companies like Build a Soil that have vetted their inputs very, very carefully. And there's a couple
mm,
blends from them that I've seen people run commercially. And I would say that it's so low metals, it's basically a non-issue.
mm,
Um, I just didn't necessarily have that luxury, which I sort of like, to be honest. And as we've gone on and I continue to do soil testing, um, the soil looks better and better on paper,
mm,
and all the things are sort of falling into place. Um, but yeah, so in the first days to basically what I'm doing, I put them in the beds. All the nutrition is there. We do our top dress and our cover crop seed all goes down right at once.
mm,
Um, and then I start the lights off sort of. They're switching from LED to HPS, so it's a little bit of a throttle.
mm,
But I try to start around
yeah,
a similar PPFD, and then I move up 50 watts per day.
mm,
So the CO2 is coming up, the temperature's coming up, um, the lights are coming up, and then I'm loosely sort of skirting on a VPD chart technically
mm,
on the parameters, but mostly it starts out humid and um, a lower PPFD, and then the PPFD starts coming up, the humidity starts coming down, the CO2 starts coming up, and
mm,
then the nutrition is there. So yeah, I give them some different microbial inputs and stuff like that. I want to start doing some like seed sprout teas and some more like sort of fun stuff that I've implemented over the years at home. But
mm,
the consistency of some of those things commercially is a little bit more challenging. So I've sort of now the beds we implemented sort of on the fly, room by room, and I still have two rooms and containers.
mm,
And I have a couple logistical issues preventing me from moving forwards directly. I have a couple hurdles to work on. But
yeah.
so yeah, it's been like some things have really been shooting from the hip, and
Mm,
everything that I'm doing is still evolving and changing.
mm. So the living soil, you have some of the large beds that I've seen. I saw a harvest coming down this week, and then you have some in pots that you're running. You said as well.
Yeah, so the initial structure that I came in on, I found Tower 3 because they were one of the only, pretty much the only people in the state that I knew growing in living soil.
Mm,
And when the project I was working on sort of uh, folded, I landed with them. But basically, they were growing in living soil containers
mm,
with the hope to one day start reusing that soil. But at the moment, they were taking 3-gallon containers, um, transplanting those into the room, and supplementing that with nutrients to
yeah.
from basically week 3 to week 7.
It
And
sounds like that's exactly the way I grow right now. So,
it's an awesome
yeah,
way to grow. I mean,
yeah,
they grew great pot without me for sure.
yeah,
But beds are really, I think, the most progressive forward approach, and also just like
mm,
there's a lot of benefits to growing in beds,
mm,
as far as the logistics of it and um, the economics of it too, of course. But for me, it's just the easiest way to grow the best cannabis with the biggest, most natural buffer. So I presented it to the team, expecting to get some pushback and be like, "All right, well, down the line, we'll think about it." And
mm,
we ended up installing one bed, single bed in a room like a few weeks later, and then after that, converted the room, and then converted the next room. We're 3 of 5 rooms are in beds now, and
mm,
honestly, the benches weren't really built for the weight,
mm.
and that's my biggest constraint. I'm destroying benches.
Yeah, I've heard this
Destroying.
before
Yeah.
from people with living soil beds. Yeah.
Yeah, because they weren't built for that kind of weight. And we've had sort of some challenges on getting new benching um, that's going to support the weight and not be absolutely ridiculous
Yeah.
financially. So
Yeah.
we're working towards it, but basically the 2 rooms that are left, we're buying new benching before we put the beds in. The other 3 rooms, we are going to eventually have to disassemble those beds and putting new benching. It's I don't know
Yeah.
how far away that is, but those benching, it's not going to work forever. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. Yeah, like Boeing. Yeah. I have a question for you about, you said, mentioned buffer, that the living soil beds were the best buffer in your opinions. What do you mean by that?
I mean, you basically don't have to water. You water very infrequently.
Mm,
Um, so there's enough moisture and nutrition for the plants.
mm.
Um, it's just like in containers, there's so many problems with irrigation. You know,
Dry back.
is a line clog. And mind you, really, my experience is so much been focused on organics. So I deal with the
Yeah.
stupidest things you can put through irrigation. I would,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I don't know if irrigation is what I'm worst at or my specialty, you know, because I am constantly dealing with it. But yeah,
Yeah.
so once you have a bed, I mean, the last 2 weeks of my cycle, I don't even, for honestly, literally 10 days to 14 days, I do not water the beds before I harvest.
Wow. That's
And
crazy.
instead of cleaning eight, 500 to 800 pots for a room,
Yeah.
emptying the soil after the harvest, cleaning all those pots, filling them back up with soil, putting them back in the room. That's what our cadence was, and that's what it is in those container rooms. And then
Yeah.
beds, the beds stay there, the soil stays there. You know, we clean the floor, clean the walls, you know, change all the
Yeah.
filters, all of those things, but the soil is there in perpetuity. So
Hmm.
um, it's saving a lot of energy, a lot of resources. Um, and yeah, like you can't really mess up the pH. The whole thing kind of buffers itself.
Hmm.
Minus my one top dress amendment, I don't really have much room for a big nutritional issue. Maybe over
Hmm.
time, over rounds and rounds of harvest, if I'm not on top of it, I might start to see some limiting factor from a deficiency or some shortcoming. But like the buffer is just that everything's already there and it's a lot
Hmm.
less fragile in that like the root and ecosystem is strong. The cover crop helps to maintain soil moisture. You know, like
Hmm.
it's all I don't know. I guess like just
Yeah.
a natural approach has that sort of benefit of just being stable.
Yeah. Well, it's, yeah, it creates a buffer for the plant in a lot of ways, water wise. Um, it like the microbial life in there creates a bit of a buffer against other, non-beneficial bacteria and microbial life, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think like strains that people say are difficult, whether it's they have very specific nutritional demands or they herm easily, stuff like that. Sorry,
Mm.
I usually don't see any
That's,
in soil. Like
yeah.
I plants that are known to herm just won't herm. Like
Yeah.
I was told recently by someone who gave me a Skittles dominant cross. I don't know if you're familiar with growing Skittles, but they're a difficult plant to root. They're prone to mold and issues and
Mm.
stuff like that. And he told me, he's like, I don't know what your program is, but if you run synthetics, this plant is going to mold.
Yeah.
And so I just, you know, sort of natural parameters. There's a certain amount of safety and balance
Mm.
in
Mm.
those natural parameters, I think.
Mm. And there's that balance there, but there's also, I mean, with so much organic matter and so much organic life in the soil, you also, I mean, for me, I grow organically in living soil as well.
Right.
Not on the scale that you do, but I still have to keep, I still have to keep things in check because there's such organic life and matter and all of this life there basically. I need to sanitize the hell out of everything constantly, right? Because things want to take hold, things want to live, and those can be beneficial. They can also be non-beneficial, you know,
Yeah.
diseases mainly. Not, I don't have issues with pests because I'm super careful about clean room and, things like that. Um, yeah, but what's your opinion on that?
On just
I mean, like,
cleaning the room and stuff like that.
yeah, like how do you guys your maintain a level of cleanliness and stuff like that to counteract all of the life that's in those
Yeah,
beds?
it's tough. I think like, you know, we're held to very strict microbial testing and often other cultivators in the state, people throw around the rhetoric that living soil can't pass testing legitimately. I think that's a big
Mm.
criticism that I often hear. And,
Yep.
I think that mainly comes from people that aren't understanding why they can't pass testing and just a lack of understanding of the
Mm.
systems at large. If your SOPs are correct and your environment is correct, you should be able to pass. However, at the same time, my soil on any given day, if you tested that soil, is certainly going to fail.
Right. Right.
Certainly, using all these fungal, bacterial, microbial components that could cause failure if they get into the bud. I think part of it is having the right environment, temperature, humidity, and plant health all
Yeah.
in check, and defoliating correctly, not leaving partially broken branches or different um, wounds that are potentially vectors for disease.
Yeah.
But it's also, yeah, like building a facility with enough HVAC or not overstuffing the room with plants. Or,
Mm.
I mean, if you, for us in living soil, I think the cover crop is important for me because it helps to create um, a shield between the soil. If the soil starts to get dry on the surface, which cover crop prevents as well, but also just the leaves being there prevent dust from going up into the canopy, which could cause a microbial failure, a metals failure. We use
Mm. Yeah.
like a
It's cool.
fabric muck sock, so we're able to remove those in between runs and bleach them. We clean
Remove what?
the duct socks. Like
Oh,
instead
okay.
of
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
metal ducting, it's like a almost
Yep.
not like canvas or plastic, but a removable sort of fabric esque material. You know,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think it's not overstuffing the room. It's keeping your environment in check. It's knowing how to
Yeah.
dry and clear properly. But I think the soil being there in perpetuity certainly creates certain challenges.
Mm.
If you were to introduce a pathogen, a root pathogen, a pest, you're living with it. You can't just throw everything away and bomb the room. Um,
Mm.
so that part,
Mm.
there's a little bit of a risk there. But yeah, I think the myth that you can't pass a microbial test or a fungal test in living soil, I think is more about user error
Mm.
and
Yeah.
bad environments than. Oh, and I guess we're doing a lot to clean the air. We have a number of different air filters. I use a
Yeah.
PCO system in every room, which is like UV and ionization and
Okay.
whole system. It's I don't know. I don't remember all the details of PCO, but basically they use them in hospitals. It ionizes the air, but then catches that ionized air
Like the
before
the, the
it
particles.
reaches to the room. Because I mean, there's been facilities in the past I've worked at where air ionizers and different things are being used that people feel uncomfortable to work around.
Mm. Yep.
My understanding is the PCO, it's all contained. Um, it's
Gotcha.
HEPA, carbon, UV, and some kind of ionization.
Mm. And
So
the air passes through it, and clean air comes out the other end.
yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
we're using that. We have, proper HVAC control, and
Yeah.
we clean everything carefully between runs.
Yeah.
I think it's a
Same
lot.
stuff I do.
Yeah, it's a lot about having the right genetics. Certain genetics
Mm.
are going to be a problem every time,
Yeah.
and certain practices that might work in a home scenario might not work. You have to kind of
Yeah.
adapt to um, a low microbial um, environment.
Yeah.
Um,
Except for what's in the soil.
right. No, the soil,
Yep.
you can have what you need
The
in the
soil's
soil.
jacked up
I
with
mean, you mentioned
microbes.
it before. You're out competing bad things. So, like, if you were to if you were to take a slab of rock wool from a facility, not brand new, but from a facility where it's being used,
Mm.
I would guess that that's going to fail microbial testing as well.
Yeah.
You may be depending on that microbial interaction less, or if at all, but like
Right.
there's still stuff going on there.
Yeah. I love the idea of the cover crop. I was going to ask you how you keep the soil from going up in the air and getting stuck on the buds and stuff like that, which would cause you to fail a test. And I love the idea of the cover crop actually tamping the soil down. It acts to keep everything down. That's really, really smart, really clever.
Yeah, I
I
think
like that.
moisture, a cover crop, or mulch. There's a number of
Yeah.
ways to approach it, but certainly that dust going in the air is a threat.
Yeah. And what do you guys do for cover crops?
So I've really been playing with this still. Um, Clover is what I'm relying on mostly.
Fixes
Um,
nitrogen.
yeah, it gets a good cover.
Yeah.
Red clover I've had particularly good luck with. I tried to switch it to white clover because the white clover is like tighter and like kind of smaller. I thought, but it doesn't root as easily. And
Mm.
in the beginning of my cycle, I don't have time to establish the cover crop before I'm transplanting. It's all kind of happening at once. So
Right.
now I'm starting to like leave more cover crop behind. And so I'll have less of a transition. But in the past, it was mostly getting destroyed, the cover crop in the process. Um, so yeah, I've been running white clover, red clover. I've been using hairy vetch. I'm doing
Yeah.
a bunch of companion planting like cilantro,
Nice.
marigolds. I've been starting to
That's
throw
cool.
some different flowers and veggies in and stuff just for fun, but also I mean like turnips for compaction and um,
Yeah.
I tried doing like mustard and triticale and collards and a whole bunch of. I've been just playing with a whole lot of different stuff. I'm starting
Mm.
to fall now into more like mainly clover with some companion planting and
Yeah.
like I have 20 beds right now, 10 in one room and one room with 10 beds and two rooms with 5 beds. And so like I'm playing with different things in different rooms and different beds, not doing the same thing in every one, but it's
Mm.
basically all clover, some marigolds and cilantro for the most part. But now I devoted a bench and veg to just sprouting marigolds and different flowers and stuff that we want to play with for cover crop and companion planting.
Yeah. I know that like clover, I was saying fixes nitrogen, and I'm
Yep.
wondering if like, do you ever have you ever tested the soil and been like, oh my God, this area over here actually has like higher levels of, you
Mm,
know,
I
nutrients
haven't
or
gone
whatever?
too far. Right now, my soil testing consists of like if I have 5 beds in the room, I'll take a little bit from each bed and mix it together and throw it out, and that's what room four is doing. Because I set
Yeah.
them all up the same with the same inputs. There were certain times at the beginning where I tested multiple beds in one room to see how they compared, but they were
Mm.
very similar.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
You
like
would hope.
yeah, they have been for me so far. So um honestly, like the soil testing, they can't really tell you anything for nitrogen, you know.
Mm.
Um I mainly use it for minerals and to just keep an eye on what's happening,
What-
but it directly informs how I'm amending for minerals. And
mm.
then everything else is sort of like subjective anyway.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting because I started with a soil that was like very low in calcium and high in sodium. And I've seen that all turn around.
It flipped.
Yeah, now the sodium was 3 times like the highest recommended rate, what they say you could. I think sodium's supposed to be between like 1 and 3 or 0 and 3, and we were
Yeah.
like 9.
Wow. Crazy.
So, the calcium was way off, and now it's all kind of where it's supposed to be. I'm adding less and
Mm.
less. I haven't been doing the soil testing as much because I've needed less,
Yeah.
you know. And like, even if the soil testing reads the same, that doesn't mean that the wheat plants are responding the same. I've done
All
different
right.
things and had similar soil tests, so it's like, um, yeah, there's certain amendments, a combination of amendments I'm finding. We're kind of now falling into balance. But I do think
Mm.
constantly shifting and evolving your amendments and compost and so on has an advantage just of the diversity over time.
Mm. You mean but changing the regimen in the same bed
Yeah,
from
like
crop to crop?
like I don't do the same exact amendments or compost every single time. Like I want
Mm.
to create a variety. Um,
Yeah.
like part of what living soil has to offer is that greater variety of inputs. So like even like
Hmm.
one program maybe could be equal or different than another program, but to me, I'd rather see both of them one after the other, like
Mm.
rotate. Yeah,
That's so cool. But when you reuse crop, I never thought about that. When you're reusing soil, you're steering it over time,
yeah. I mean,
like long over long stretches of time.
yeah. There's worms and all these natural decomposers in there, and the beds are slowly shifting towards bacterial dominance, and
Mm.
we are. That's just what worms are doing, and that's just what's happening, at least for
Mm.
us. And so cannabis in veg, bacterial is cool, but you really want fungal dominance for bloom. And I'm almost
Mm.
exclusively blooming in these beds. They're vegging for a
Right.
short period of time. We do a 10-week bloom cycle and a 5-day in the bed veg cycle. So
Mm.
um, I want fungal dominance. So like some of the inputs are to push the beds
Mm.
toward fungal dominance.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Well, speaking of the strains that you're growing, I know that I saw your moon butter the other day. That looked amazing. Super gassy. It looks like it's just like gassed my face off immediately. And so I feel like you have a penchant for the gassy strains. Is that accurate?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the weed
Awesome.
that I like. And I think that there's more to it than that, but that's definitely my focus at work. We try to have a broader perspective on what makes cannabis great. And I think
Mm.
like having a flavor and a mouth coat, an aroma and a mouth coat, and maybe even if you're lucky, a name that corresponds with that is what
Right.
wins for the consumer at large. Me, I like gas. I want skunky fuel
Yeah.
weed only. I've I've actually struggled a little bit trying to pick strains outside of my spectrum. I'll be like, this isn't what I like, but this is great for the facility and for the consumer at large. That's the
Mm.
only place where I really miss.
Yeah.
I don't miss on the gas that I know best. Like if I'm like, this is the strain that I want to smoke, that hits every time. I never miss. Um,
Yeah.
but trying
My
to,
my wife is here. She said I love the gas, and that's true.
yeah.
She loves the gas. So
So like, there's everyone. There's been this whole tack thing. Everyone weed sells based on tack. The retailers buy based on tack, etc. Whatever. And
mm,
then now there's sort of this somewhat deeper understanding where people are like, oh no, it's not the tack, it's the terps. And then everyone wants
mm.
to focus on terp testing and
The TAC is total active cannabinoids for the people that my
or
wife that doesn't know what
yeah,
that means.
cannabinoid testing means nothing. And so then everyone goes, oh, I know cannabinoid testing means nothing. It's the terpenes that matter. And for me, terpenes don't really matter either. It's just another way to try to quantify this,
Mm.
to remove the human understanding, to devalue the human understanding, and
Mm.
create a position where a company doesn't have to hire someone like you or myself to determine what's good or bad or what it even is. So um, the weed that I like, skunk and fuel weed, it's not going to be in high terpenes. It's going to be high sulfides and thiols.
Mm.
So that's the
VSCs.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the moon butter, that's like a chem OG sort of iteration. It falls
Mm.
sort of in the Star Dog line. Um, it's Star Kush crossed the Butterwolf. The Butterwolf is kind of the strain that I made that has picked up the most momentum, that has the most
Mm.
legs.
Yeah.
Swamp Thing peanut butter breath. It's very fuel forward, but it's got some like
Mm.
tire shop, like rubber, almost like strawberry notes. But it's very much
Yeah.
like an OG. It looks like it grows like an OG, but it has like purple and
Mm.
pink for the leaves. But it pretty much stays mostly green unless you really get it cold. But purple, big gland, very robust fuel profile,
Mm.
finishes fast. It's very few leaves, washes well. I don't really care
Yeah.
about washing, but people like to hear that, and it is
Yeah.
it is important for the modern market. So the Star Kush cross to the Butterwolf, that was my moon butter. The moon butter, it's Star Kush leaning, but it takes from both plants. Um,
Mm.
falls within the green fuel spectrum. I like I like to tell people that I look at weed through an East Coast lens, and so
Huh.
it falls into that chem dog based sort of philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think that the gassy varieties, the ones with the high VSCs, do you think they're more of a sedative or a uplifting feeling for you?
Um, for the people at large, sedative. For me, if
Yeah.
weed tastes great, it gets me excited, and I need a punchy high to feel pot. Like I take bong hits starting in the morning, and I have for a very long
Yeah.
time. So like Skittles, fruity weed like that. Like Skittles, I like to bring up because it's one that I actually like. It's a candy strain that really does something for me, but it's not strong.
Mm.
It's certainly not going to get me particularly stoned. That other the
Yeah.
VFGs, that gets me stoned. I think that's why my body craves skunk and fuel. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, for me it's functional because it gets me excited, and some maybe more so
Mm.
than others. The Butterwolf is reportedly very lethargic weed,
Yeah, yeah.
and I think some strains like GG4 is one that everyone smoked that falls in that fuel skunk spectrum, but I find to be pretty light and functional. Like it gets you
I do
stoned,
too. Yeah,
it's functionally stoned. Um,
yeah.
so Butterwolf may be less functional,
Mm.
and I think if you're used to it, if you have a tolerance for it, gas weed
Yeah.
may be functional.
I'm asking because I've noticed that gas varieties tend to be a little bit more sedative. People kind of agree that they're a little bit more sedative usually, um, and they tend to be good for anxious, anxiety. People with that are a little high strung or maybe ADHD, things like this, for kind of attenuating that really high strung kind of level and just kind of bringing it down a notch so they can focus. Um, I don't know. I don't know if that's been my experience with it. And for me, I like gassy strains in the right moment. I'm kind of the other way. Like I need to have the uplifting strains, during the
Mhm.
day, and I like gassy strains at night. Like if to go and have like the wind me down.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm trying to learn that. I'm trying to like um, gain that maturity. I just like growing up in New York City. It's just like I grew up sour diesel, OG Kush, Chem Dog.
Yeah,
Like
it's an East Coast thing. People are just hardcore out there, man. They just want to
yeah,
go for it.
it's just what I've always wanted. Me and my little brother were just like on a savage hunt for sour diesel and Chem Dog since I was like very young. So that weed is just what makes me happy,
Yeah,
and whatever comes along with that, I kind of just accept. But I think, yeah, there's really a place to smoke other kinds of weed.
yeah, yeah. You met ChemDog. I saw him at your facility recently. Yeah, are
Yeah,
you
so
guys
Dog. Yeah, I went and saw
associates?
him at his facility. Um, yeah, he's not someone that I'm close with, but we've become friends. Um,
Yeah.
his impact on the genetics to me is just so huge, and it's cool, man. He's a cool guy. He's really done something special. Um,
Yeah.
and people ask me about ChemDog a lot, and people ask me about the ChemDog cut that I have a lot. I've been like sort of struggling with how to handle it right now because
Mm.
I've gone through a lot of different iterations of life where I've sort of sustained selling clones and shit like that. And so like
Yeah.
people have a very exclusive approach where they're like, oh, I have a special plant. I don't want anyone to have it. I've had
Mm.
friends not share chem dog plants to me specifically that I always wanted to grow and never would have shared. And then they got
Huh.
arrested and lost everything. And I would have had it for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and also like failed to make it to the legal market and now
Mm.
work in other industries because they weren't able to make that transition. So like I've sort of taken a different approach. When I made the Butterwolf, I'm like, this plant is special, and
Mm.
I'm gonna spread it. I don't care if I make $1. Probably will make a few dollars, but mainly,
Mm.
I just want people to experience this genetic
Yeah.
and to see how far it can go and what its impact could be. So um, by sharing that plant and it actually having value, it's gone a lot further than hoarding that plant, not let
Yeah.
anyone have it. However, most recently, well, I don't know. The chem dog thing is complicated, but recently I've been getting a
Mm.
lot of inquiries about the chem dog, and I'm unsure of how to handle it.
Mm.
And I have mixed feelings morally, but also like,
In terms of releasing it?
yeah, in terms of people that want
Yeah.
to buy from me, in terms of
Yeah.
releasing it, crossing with it, everything. I've made some crosses with it, and
That
I'm
must
like,
be such
I
a
didn't even want to bring it to work, honestly. Just, I don't know. It just feels like it was so hard to get and something I wanted for so many
yeah.
years. And I went through so much to get it. And then people want it for nothing or for very little or
Yeah.
for less than I feel like it's
Yeah.
just, I don't know. At a certain point, it's like I've held a lot of strains for a lot of years
Mm.
and through a lot of different um, tough things in life. Life
Yeah.
is hard
Yeah.
for everyone.
Well,
And
I
like,
mean, it'd be one thing, James, if you were just like just growing a home grower or something like that and sharing your genetics, but you're actually growing these, I mean, as part of a business, like you need to protect your IP as well. So there's that.
Yeah.
Um,
And yeah, people make careers off things. There's I know friends that have lost friendships and burned major, you know, houses have been torn apart by different cuts that weren't supposed to be shared. Like I've seen it
yeah,
over and over again with different things. I've helped to
yeah,
like bridge some gaps and bring some people back together where like they
mm,
fell apart over one strain and I'm like given a cut and I've been told, okay, you can have this cut, but you can't tell anyone what it is, and you absolutely can't tell this
right,
person to have it. And I'm like, I'm not gonna, I can't do that. Like, if I'm gonna take this plant from you, I'm gonna
yeah,
tell the person that I have it, and I'm gonna go work it out with them because I'm not gonna lie about what this plant is, and it has no value to me if I can't use it under its name. So, you know what I mean? So it's
yeah,
like, there's one plant in specific that really that I made that connection with that I thought was fun,
mm,
and now I can use it under its rightful name without drama, which is
yeah.
fun. But yeah, I mean, I'm working on something with ChemDog. I'm hoping we'll talk
That's
about
what I was
that
gonna ask.
another day. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I mean,
cool.
he understood the genetics. He got weed that was of value
Yeah,
and found some seeds in it. Was smart enough to store them and grow
mm,
them and perpetuate them. And
yeah,
I think that has been invaluable. And he's a historian and a librarian and
mm,
torch carrier. But
yeah,
yeah, I think people's palate and understanding has been deeply undervalued in the
mm,
legal system and
mm,
structure. And I think it's like the most important part. Yeah, I can teach anyone how to grow in living soil beds, but if you don't know what ChemDog tastes like, you can't determine it from something else. If you don't know what
mm,
sulfides and thiols, mouth coat from a sulfide thiol heavy plant tastes like, you will be unable to make a selection that expresses that. You know what I mean?
I'm
And
gonna,
so
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that understanding is a very deep part of being successful. When I was like a amateur grower, I grew some pretty fire weed because of my understanding of the genetics.
mm,
That's sort of what set me apart at first. And so I just feel like that's really undervalued and really where people have dedicated their time and energy to this plant where the value is there. You know what I mean? Like if you've
mm.
done that, if you've bought thousands of bags of weed, you have incredible value to a cannabis employer. They would just might not know
Um, well, we got just a few more minutes left, and I have a pressing question that I wanted to ask you, which is that you mentioned that, wait, I gotta read it. You mentioned that you believe that our co-evolution with cannabis didn't happen by accident, and I wanted to ask you about that, but I wanted to preface that by by saying that I believe that also, and that I know that we're, you know, 10,000 years ago they found cultivated cannabis, or they found cultivated cannabis from 10,000 years ago, I believe it was in China. So we know that people were cultivating this, and those were the first home growers that we know of, right? Um, but what can you tell me what do you
Well,
mean by that?
yeah. Well, first I'll just say like that's really a nod to like Body of Desire and Jeff Lowenfels, and he's sort of like in the intro. He's like, cannabis is a part of that book, but it's not really the most interesting part to me. Like he's talking about potatoes and this potato catalog and like how like this who's in charge and who's influencing who to grow who. But if you
Hmm,
look at a living soil bed, I mean, all of these plants and systems are in symbiosis with each other. And in the same way, we're in symbiosis with nature. And cannabis may have been the first agricultural plant cultivated for yield. You know what I mean? Like,
hmm, yeah,
I know people that would tell you that, um, and maybe I believe this, or maybe I just like to think it could be a cool idea, where like the first agricultural crop was cannabis because it was being used as maybe like a rope and all these food source and all these different things and seeds along some kind of nomadic trail. Someone realized, oh my God, these seeds actually grew plants, and
hmm,
someone stopped and said, I'm gonna grow a crop of plants here, and then and then
yeah,
that plant ends up having yield, and the yield has surplus, and the surplus leads to wanting to create hierarchy, which leads to the concept of family, and
hmm.
like human society and culture at large stems from these cannabis plants falling off this trail. Like I don't know, but I just sort of feel like
Yeah,
the coevolution and the symbiosis with plants is an obvious part of our existence, and
yeah,
cannabis is such an integral piece of that. It brings so much peace and balance to the system,
hmm,
and
hmm,
Yeah, I just think it's a very successful plant. It's symbiosis with, from an evolutionary standpoint, it's symbiosis with humans. It's going to make it
Yeah.
one of the few species that, will try and Elon Musk will try and take off this planet to some space station when we ruin this place.
Yeah,
Like
it's going to be one of the few species that survives.
totally. There's going to be conventional strawberries and Labrador retrievers and sour diesel. You know what I mean? Like it's coming. It's
Yeah.
coming. And like I've seen people talk about how like a lot of the hydroponic technology that NASA uses and that's brought into space and that will be used to cultivate um, plants on other planets is all technology that was advanced and developed through agriculture, through cannabis. Like cannabis drove
Mm,
forward a lot of technology in agriculture.
mm,
Um,
mm.
I don't know. I mean, I
Yeah.
just I just feel so strongly about the plant. I've had a lot of, I've been questioned over and over again over the years on cannabis use and its potential disruption to your feelings and
Mm.
disruption to other people and its risks
Uh,
to law and its health, you know,
yeah.
risks and consequences. And um, I just, it just, what it does for me and what I've seen it do for other people is just so valuable that
Mm.
if I get throat cancer and die from taking too many bong hits, it will be, I'll be perfectly satisfied with that.
Yeah, there's a give and take. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that, and I feel the same way. I feel like, I mean, tomatoes were at one point were poisonous to us, and now we have them on pizzas and eat them all day long, grow them in our gardens. Um, uh, as they're part of the nightshade family.
Right.
And yeah, I think cannabis. I mean, those first people that found those seeds and started cultivating it, maybe it was more of a fiber type thing. But then they found some of this resin. Their hands got all sticky, and they're like, "What does this do?" Or maybe they burned it. Maybe they tried it, started using it in medicine, helped them to sleep better, took away some of their pain, and they started, well, what if I grew this here, and what if I grew this next in my garden, and what if I, you know, start breeding them so I can have more of this sticky stuff that grows on them, and
Yeah.
um, and here we are.
Yeah. I mean, I think I know a lot of people very disconnected from nature that
Mm,
found an appreciation and connection from nature through cannabis. And like
mm,
nature has a way of like correcting itself and healing itself. And like maybe those people would find a connection with a different plant later on in life. But like to me, it creates a connection to the earth and to the planet and to
mm,
some kind of morality that
mm.
has a ton of value. And yeah, again, the symbiosis goes both ways, you
Yeah,
know?
I would say it connects us to ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
Helps us to know ourselves a little bit better, slow down a bit.
I would say so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know. I have a lot of hope. This is like really grandiose thinking, but I have a lot of hope for cannabis that it can help us as a society in that way. It can help us to be more self-reflective and think more about our actions and think more about our time and how we treat people. Um, I mean, certainly the stoners that I know as a whole are generally very kind and loving and accepting people, and I don't say that everybody needs to be stoned so that we can achieve that, but it as a plant, it's something that I feel like was put here for us to help us as a buffer for this reality and for this life, to help us along, so that we can do the things that we want to do and be happy. So that's why I grow it.
Agreed. I love it, man. Yeah, I mean, there's something special, like you said, with the sticky resin. Like I remember seeing the first time I saw a pound of some true exotic fire. I couldn't even understand what its connection to a plant really was. But
Yeah.
I was just like that. I'm going to be in the room where that happens.
Yeah.
Whatever that, whatever's going on there, I'm finding my way to that. It
Me,
has
same
to.
with me. Exactly. Yeah, I
Yeah.
had the exact same experience as soon as I grew up in New Orleans and only smoked Mexican brickweed, and I saw my first weed from Seattle, actually. My first chronic weed, and as soon as I saw that bud and smoked it and smelled it, I was like, I'm going to pursue this, whatever this is. I need
Mhm.
to go after this.
Yeah. So I mean, that draw. There's something special about the draw, and I think it does lead people down pretty positive paths for the most part.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. All right, James. Well, we're gonna have to call it, but I'm man, it's such a great pleasure talking to you and spending time with you. James Wormser, Director of Cultivation with Tower 3 LLC in Boston, joining us today. And thank you, everyone who joined us. And James, appreciate you.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. I'll be
Awesome.
watching
All right.
next time.
Y-
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Peace.
Bye bye. Have a good weekend.